All right, I'm here. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thanks so much for joining us on a Wednesday. My name is Josh. This is the Jmull Show. Thank you so much for joining us on a Wednesday. We got a lot to get to on multiple fronts today. So the Titans just didn't play football for 2 weeks and then absolutely dusted the Bills. That happened. But the headline after that game, along with the fact that they beat the Bills, who were looking like one of the better football teams in the AFC, after beating them 42-16, the Titans are incredibly upset for the way that they were treated during their COVID-19 journey, mishap, misstep, whatever words you want to use there. And I'm a little confused as to why. We'll get to that in about 20 minutes or so. I also just started over at 110sportsmedia.com, started my 2020 NBA Draft guide. Started with point guards, really went in depth on the top 15 point guards in this draft class. You have guys from some of the more decorated college basketball players of the last 10, 15 years to guys from overseas to guys that played on mid-majors teams that, unless you're a diehard college basketball fan, you might not have heard of before to any extent other than in passing. We'll do that at about 11:40 or so and then get out of here with FYI and call it a day. But what I want to start with, first of all, I've returned briefly to a state in which I can wager on sports. Shouts to the state of Indiana, the state of Tennessee, where I currently reside, is, they passed a sports betting bill over a year ago now, and it just hasn't been put into practice yet, which is fine. I've heard that there's been a few more important issues to tackle over the last 12, 16 months or so. So that's totally fine. But when I get a chance to come back to Indiana or wherever I'm going that might allow me to wager on live sports, I got to get my fix, so to speak. I started very simple. I started with some bets on some games. No prop bets, no Josh Allen throws over 2.5 touchdowns or under 2.5 touchdowns, which I'm really glad didn't take that one. But here's what I did last night. I went with the Bills. Because, the Titans haven't played football in over 2 weeks. And haven't really practiced either, right? I mean, they spent a lot of that time with football operations halted. So I thought, okay, the Bills 4-0, the Titans, yes, 3-0, but haven't played football in a couple weeks. Might be a little rusty, and the Bills are a good enough football team on both sides of the ball that if you have to take a quarter and a half to shake off the rust, that you might be in a hole that you can't dig yourself out of. I thought that was certainly not an unintelligent bet. L. The Astros hitting the cover off the baseball in the divisional round, down 2-0 in a series. Thought maybe you get the bats out and actually hit the baseball in Game 3 to avoid going down 3-0 to a Rays team that's absolutely just lights out right now. And I guess there's certainly part of me that you could convince I should have done something different there. But I didn't think it was all that ridiculous. L. Wasn't really that close. And then I bet on a Dodgers team because I just can't really get past the fact that, this is the best baseball team in the sport all year. I thought, maybe they bounce back. The bats, you only get 4 hits in Game 1. Maybe you come back out and actually perform like a Dodgers offense is supposed to. And to a certain extent, I was right, but only for the 9th inning. Other than that, they just couldn't touch the baseball, couldn't touch Ian Anderson. He continues to be absolutely phenomenal for that baseball team. Now, we're talking like $7 or something. Not a lot of money, but it's a tough pill to swallow to return to something that energizes my daily watching of sports from a just fan perspective. You know, we watch a lot of basketball, we watch a lot of sports that we can come and talk about it wherever it might be. Betting energizes some of that casual viewing that I do for no reason other than to watch, and it went really, really poorly last night. So rest in peace to my return to betting on sports. We haven't completely run dry in the sportsbook account, so we'll give it another shot tonight. But it was not a good start. But talking about baseball here, I want to talk about these two championship series right now. The Rays and the Braves are combined 5-0 in these two series. Rays. Listen, I mean, the Rays pitching was good against the Yankees, but it wasn't lights out. It wasn't like the Yankees couldn't get a run across to save their lives. And the Astros were performing better on the offensive side of the baseball than the Yankees were coming into the divisional series. I mean, the Astros, they ran away with that divisional series because of how well they were hitting the baseball. 5 runs in 3 games. 3 runs total given up by Rays pitchers in 15 innings of total work. All 3 of their starting pitchers have gone 5 full innings. They've given up a combined total of 3 runs. You know, it's pretty easy for a Rays team that has such a impressive pitching staff. The best way to sort of disrupt that, and this is an obvious thing to say, but to try and get to a point where you're forcing them to plot out their bullpen in a way that's not exactly how they're hoping to draw it up. And the way they're hoping to draw it up is they have a pitcher go through the lineup a couple times, not give up a single run or give up 1 run or give up 3 runs total in 3 games. Go 5 full, and then, you know, the bullpen is set up. You know, in a perfect world, maybe you go 6, so you have a guy for the 7th inning, a setup guy in the 8th, and a closer in the 9th. But that's so predictable for the Rays, and they can really set up their bullpen the way that they want to if they're getting guys going 5 innings the way that they're hoping that they will. And that sounds like a really obvious thing to say, but even if it's, you know, making the guy throw a lot of pitches, even if you don't end up getting a run across, just making the guy throw a lot of pitches so he's out in, you know, 3 2/3 or 4 1/3 or whatever it might be, because these Rays pitchers are leaving the game, and the Rays have the lead in a lot of these scenarios. We're into the 6th inning, and now you're the Astros, who are trying to come back against a absolutely lights out pitching staff right now and a lights out defense. That's a really, really tall task. And the thing is, the Astros pitchers aren't even performing that poorly right now. I mean, they're not performing great, but apart from, you know, a couple bad innings, I mean, in Game 3, the Rays got all 5 of their runs in the top of the 6th. In Game 2, the Rays got 3 of their 4 runs in the bottom of the 1st. And then, of course, it was a 2-1 Game 1 win, in which they had 1 run in the 4th and the 5th inning. And that just, you can't be mad at that. I mean, Houston had 9 hits. They just couldn't get one across, apart from, I believe it was Altuve's first inning home run. So they're not even pitching all that poorly. It's just the Rays defense and that pitching staff has been so good that 5 runs is way too many to give up to the Rays. They've been solid apart from 2 or 3 innings of the 27 through these 3 games. That Rays defense is absolutely suffocating. Just can't begin to describe how suffocating it is. It was actually laugh out loud funny how many diving catches, the shortstop getting into the hole, couple really nice plays out in center field, another one out in right. It was just when the Astros actually made contact, the Rays were the Rays were finding a way to get it into their glove. It just and get the out. I saw a tweet last night. Someone said, 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by water. The other 29% are covered by the Rays defense. Laugh out loud funny, but not inaccurate. Certainly not last night. And when you combine those two things, it's going to be really hard to beat this Rays team, and certainly it's going to be hard to when you're making mistakes like Altuve has forgotten how to throw the baseball. He's made a couple routine ground ball throwing errors. I mean, it's one thing to get, have one hit, take a weird hop and you get a couple errors that way, or it's hit really hard at you and it gets under your glove, or it's in the hole or whatever. That's one kind of error. But on routine ground balls and you're making horrible throws to first or horrible throws to, you're short hopping the shortstop who's covering the bag at second by 4 feet, and you're standing pretty much in the same spot that you were before the play started. That's not good. And that's not good regardless of who you're playing, but it's really not good when you're playing a Rays team that is going to they're going to make it really hard for you to beat them. I equate this to the Heat a little bit. The Heat don't blow you away on paper, but they do a lot of the little things right, which is why they were able to get to the finals, and why, despite being banged up against a team that was clearly better than they were, they still managed to get it to 6 games. The Heat make you beat them, and they don't hand you a lot of things. The Rays are going to make you beat them. And one of the ways that you make it a lot harder to beat them is making really silly throwing errors. Really silly. And putting yourselves in really tough positions. I mean, I find it hard to believe that this game isn't over. This series isn't over. Of course, we all know who the only team in Major League Baseball history to come back from 3-0 down is. That's the Red Sox. Go Sox against the Yankees, 0-4. It was an ALCS, which is, to say, it's a coincidence and nothing else that it so happens to be the ALCS. I mean, but the Rays lost more than 4 or more games in a row once this season, so they did have a rough patch. But you've got 3 games left. You've got to win 4 games, and in those 4 games, you're going to see, if you get to a game 7, you'll see Blake Snell and Tyler Glasnow and just this dynamite Rays, starting rotation. Not to mention that their bullpen is pretty good. And that just sounds so daunting. Especially if the Astros are going to keep making mistakes the way that they have. And so far, I think you're relatively happy, apart from those one bad innings here and there. You're relatively happy with what you've gotten from your Astros pitching, which was the biggest question mark coming into these playoffs. I think you're relatively happy, but with that being said, it clearly needs to be a little better, and I'm not sure you can get more out of that Astros pitching. Clayton Kershaw was scratched from Game 2 his game 2 start due to back spasms. Just, hours before first pitch, and Tony Gonsolin got the start in his place. Gonsolin was good early in the game, was effective the first time through the lineup, and he was a solid pitcher all year, so it wasn't like it was a horrible thing that Gonsolin was going to have to start game 2. Gonsolin in 10 regular season, excuse me. Gonsolin in 8 starts, had a 2.31 ERA, 46 strikeouts against 7 walks and 46 2/3 innings. It was his first career playoff appearance, and, the last thing you want for your first playoff appearance is something you weren't expecting. I'm sure he probably would have started game 3. But having to throw a guy who's never pitched in the playoffs into that, like that against the Braves offense like that, he was good the first time through the order, but then gave up 5 earned runs in innings 4 and 5 that second time through the order. And, here's what's so interesting about the Braves. There's not many teams that can go toe-to-toe with the Dodgers in terms of offense. The Braves are one of those teams. These are 2 of the best offenses in baseball by most metrics. These teams in most metrics are first or second hitting the baseball. And so you couple that with this absolutely elite starting pitching they have at the top of the rotation. Now, I think the really interesting part of this series will be right in the middle of this series. To say the Dodgers have the momentum is a silly thing to say, despite their 4-run bottom of the 9th to almost bring this game back. They had the tying run 90 feet away from home at one point. So, yes, there might be a moral victory there, but to say that they've got momentum when they're down 2-0 is a silly thing to say, regardless of how game 2 actually ended up ending. But the Braves have elite starting pitching at the top of their rotation. Ian Anderson, Max Fried, 10 innings, 5 hits, 1 run against this Dodgers lineup. Incredible. Just absolutely incredible. Starting pitching has been better in both games. And then, so you get to game 3, assuming that Clayton Kershaw is going to be able to pitch in at some point in the series, you think that that's a game in which you really need to try and win. But the thing here is that the Braves were up 7-0, and then 8-3. So the point here is that at some point the Dodgers are going to get it rolling with the bats. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. But the Braves have the offense to create a buffer zone so that they can withstand those runs that they go on. Up 7-0, and then they were up 8-3. So the Dodgers chipped away at the lead a little bit. And then the Dodgers come and score 4 in the bottom, so they're up 7-3, and then got that 8th run in the top of the 9th. But then you withstand those 4 runs that the Dodgers get in the bottom of the 9th. The Dodgers are gonna, in most games, going to have an inning or two where they string together some hits, someone hits a home run, they put up multiple runs in an inning, and they did it twice in this game. Bottom of the 7th, bottom of the 9th, 7 runs in 3 innings. That's the kind of pop that this Dodgers lineup has, and that's not any kind of new news whatsoever. But what the Braves can do is they're capable of scoring enough runs that they can withstand that. From all over the lineup, Freddie Freeman is hitting the cover off the baseball. And despite the fact that Azuña and D'Arnaud, combined to go 0 of 7 from the plate in this game, Freddie Freeman had a pair of hits, 3 RBIs. Albies had a good game, 3 hits, 2 RBIs. Dansby Swanson continues to be a really nice bat in the sort of mid-back half part of that lineup, and one of those unexpected consistent contributors to that lineup. They've got so many weapons in that batting order that they're able to put this buffer between them and the Dodgers so that the Dodgers have to do a lot to come back. And you're just sort of waiting for that to happen because you thought, no way this Dodgers team in 18 innings is going to score only one run. And that's what we were looking at. We were staring that right in the face in the bottom of the 7th inning. And then they go and score 7 runs, something that, of course, they were capable of doing. It just wasn't enough because the Braves put that buffer, which is why this is such an interesting series. The Braves now up 2-0. The Dodgers need more consistent bats. I don't need to tell you that. They need their bats to show up more consistently. The other way suggests that they don't have the consistent bats. Of course, they have the bats in that lineup. I mean, the lineup they put out there tonight was Betts, Seager, Turner, Muncy, Smith, Bellinger, Pollock, Peterson, and Taylor. I mean, come on. I think the next 2 to 3 games are really interesting because the next 2 to 3 games, especially on the Braves side of things, is where the back half of their rotation gets a little bit iffier. And of course, the Braves have a really, one of the best bullpens in baseball this season. But after Max Fried and Ian Anderson, do you have starting pitchers that can go your 4 innings, your 5 innings? We talked about this with the Rays, that they're just getting such consistent starting pitching regardless of who's on the mound. Can the Braves find a way to get that from the next guy up? And if the answer is yes, the Dodgers are in trouble, but how the Dodgers lineup take advantage of the C, D, and E, or just the C and D guys in the Braves starting rotation, and at the very least get game 3. If they don't get game 3, and we talked about this a moment ago, if they don't get game 3, the series is over. It's almost a lock. Save 2004. Coming up next, the Titans are mad about how they were treated during their COVID journey. And I'm going to tell you why I'm a little confused by that coming up next on the Jmull Show. And then in a little while, we'll talk about some draft point guards in this year's draft class. We'll do all of that coming up next on the Jmull Show, 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the Jmull Show on a Wednesday, twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thanks so much for joining us on a Wednesday. Last night, the Bills got smoked by the Titans. We've covered it. I bet on the Bills. It was wrong. I'm upset about it. We've covered that. But who's also upset is the Titans. And because the Titans, you'll be shocked to hear, not in the best of standings with the NFL right now. You have roughly 24 players and or staff get infected. There was certainly an outbreak of COVID-19 in the Tennessee Titans organization. As a result of that, I mean, we talked about it at the end of the show on Monday. As a result of that, there's been a really obscene amount of games had to be rescheduled. As a result, so a couple things here. First of all, you don't have 24 cases if you follow the COVID protocols put in place by the NFL. That's the whole point of the protocols. That's the whole point of a mask in general. So that if you have it and you don't know it yet, you're not giving it to somebody else. Same thing goes for an NFL organization. Now, the time in between tests is much shorter, so the likelihood is much less, but clearly it's possible. So there still needs to be the following of guidelines, such as wearing masks during team meetings and doing the social distancing thing and following the rules when you're not inside the team facilities. Now, of course, I don't know where it started, but the whole point of wearing a mask and testing is so that whoever got it first, whoever gets it first, even if he happens to be in close contact, that there's a chance he doesn't give it. And if he's wearing a mask and the other guy's wearing a mask and they're social distancing, and so even if they're in the same team meeting, there's a chance that nobody else gets it. I find it really hard to believe that you get 24, roughly, cases in one organization if you're all following the rules. So yeah, Ryan Tannehill, people are a little annoyed at you. It changes game schedules. It messes up, the way that teams have mapped out their seasons. It messes up preparation. It messes up travel. It makes everyone's lives harder. And clearly, because COVID tests on other teams haven't resulted in breakouts everywhere. So clearly there was either a bending or a complete foregoing of the rules and the protocol that's been put in place. Because you just don't get that many cases if you're following the rules. It's the whole point of the rules. It's not to completely eliminate the COVID cases necessarily, because to a certain extent, when there are that many people in that close proximity, and an NFL operation is as big as it is, to a certain extent, it's inevitable. But the protocols certainly help decrease the spread. Like, that's the whole idea in the entire country, and specifically in this case, an NFL organization. So yeah, people were annoyed with you. This is from a CBS Sports article. Of course, the reputation that Tennessee gained over the last couple weeks was that it was being careless with the protocols that were put in place by the league. In that time, reports were surfacing about a potential penalty that the Titans may face, especially after a group of players were seen working out together amid the facility shutting down. That right there is you not following the rules. That right there is you not following protocol. That right there is making everybody's life harder. So I'm confused as to why you're confused, Ryan Tannehill. After the game, Tannehill was quoted saying, yeah, we were under, quote, we were under a lot of heat. Honestly, I didn't quite understand it, why we were under such heat. Yeah. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why you're under so much heat. It would be one thing if there's an outbreak and it's clear that you're following all the rules. It's another thing when there's an outbreak and you're seen, there are witnesses, reports of you not following the rules. It's kind of like getting a bad grade on a test. Like if you get a bad grade on a test, but it's just really tough material and you studied a bunch for it and you still got a bad grade, like that happens. You went through the processes and sometimes things still don't go your way. And that happens. COVID-19 cases gonna happen in the NFL, even if teams are following every protocol, and crossing all of their T's and dotting all of their I's. But if you fail that test because you didn't study, then that bad test grade might be looked at a little differently. In this scenario, let's say you're in 8th grade. You might be under some heat from your family as a result. From your parents. In this little metaphor, the Titans are the kid getting the bad test grade, and the parents are the NFL. You didn't study for the test, Ryan Tannehill, Tennessee Titans. You didn't study for the test. So you might deserve some of that heat. You might deserve it. That's all I'm saying. And really, more than anything, I'm just confused as to why they seem to be so confused that people might be taken aback and that the league might be taken aback by the clear lack of respect for the rules. I say over this, and believe me, I'd love for, even if teams didn't follow the rules, for nobody to get sick. That would be awesome. So hopefully this doesn't come off as, yeah, you deserved that. I'm so glad you got sick. That's not the point I'm trying to make here. But it makes it a lot less likely that 24 some people are going to get sick if you just follow the rules. So hopefully they learn their lesson. Hopefully they can continue, because the puzzle gets more and more complex every time a team has to miss a game. More and more complex. So hopefully we minimize that as much as possible. And minimizing that at Ryan Tannehill and the Tennessee Titans starts with following league protocol. Coming up next, I just started a series over at 110sportsmedia.com, my 2020 NBA Draft Guide. We started with the point guards. I got 15 of them. I want to talk about them real quick. We'll do that next on the Jmull Show, 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the Jmull Show on a Wednesday. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thanks so much for joining us on a Wednesday. The Titans don't seem to get it. That's okay, though. You know what? I have started over at the 110 Sports Media, at 110sportsmedia.com. It's my 2020 NBA Draft Guide. And I spent a lot of time on this, over 5,000 words on 15 point guards in this draft. And I want to talk about it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about it. 15 guards. I went through some tape with some film. First of all, it's just kind of fun reliving some of these college games with people in stands, looking through film. Also, watching some games from overseas is fun as well. Breaking down some of these guards that play, whether it be in the Euro League or somewhere else in Europe. We'll start with 15. We'll go down to 1. And the group at the back half of this list, 15 through 10, the college pedigree is absolutely crazy. We'll start with number 15. That's Myles Powell, the Seton Hall point guard. Listen, Myles is a gifted scorer, but he's got a lot of holes in his game. He's not super quick laterally, which means he isn't a great on-ball defender, and he doesn't have a ton of explosiveness either. Listen, he's an 195-pound guard, 6'2". So he could get to a point. There's probably some room for him to get a little bit leaner, and that would certainly help with his explosiveness. But the place where Myles Powell is going to get to the NBA is with his scoring ability. There are certainly questions about whether or not he's capable of playing off the ball. He didn't shoot it great in college last season, at just 30.6% from the three-point line. But that's not nearly that's way lower than any of his other seasons, so I think that might be a bit of an outlier. We'll see, if he can learn to catch and shoot a little bit better, move without the ball some, and expand his offensive game so that he is a little bit better without the ball in his hands on that end of the floor, and then increases his defensive ability. I think he has a chance to make it in the NBA for sure, and I certainly wouldn't bet against him. He's a very hard worker, and he's a gifted offensive threat. It's just a matter of can he expand that game and translate that game to the NBA level. But anybody who averages more than 21 points per game in 2 different years at the college level is clearly capable of putting the ball in the basket. But Myles, he's 15th on my list. Coming in at number 14, these guys were really close. Marcus Howard, I put at 14th just because of how lethal of a three-point shooter he is. Absolutely lethal. He took nearly 10 threes per game, right at 10 threes per game, and still shot 41% from beyond the arc. There is a place in the NBA for a guy who shoots that well from the three-point line. He's small. He's only 5'11", 180, so that's clearly an issue that's indisputable. He's not just a shooter, though. He's got great balance and footwork. He's got really nice handles. So that turns him into a 3-level scorer. He can shoot the 3, of course. Has a nice pull-up jumper and can get to the rim. Of course, he definitely errs on the side of shooting the basketball, of course. I mean, everybody who shoots like him would. But he's certainly a more than just a three-point shooter, which is not always the case for guys who shoot it as well as he does coming out of college. He's really undersized. He's going to have some trouble guarding even the smaller guards in the NBA, the 6'2" guards in the NBA. But he's quick, pretty quick. And if you put him in a situation, especially coming off the bench, where he can take shots and he can sort of lean on other guys that are better defenders, and you can hide him on different players on the floor, there's certainly a world in which Marcus Howard is around in the NBA for a while, and anybody who shoots the ball like he does has a chance to have a real impact on an NBA franchise. But he's 14th on my list. 13th, Peyton Pritchard, also a really nice three-point shooter, 6'2", 190-pound guard from Oregon. He's everything that's right with college basketball. He's a hometown kid that went to Oregon and went from 7.4 points per game as a freshman to 20 points, 4 rebounds, 5.5 assists, and a consensus All-American as a senior. With all the ways to forego college basketball nowadays, and even more ways that are going to be coming soon, there are still guys like this, and Pritchard's a great example of that. He led the entire country in offensive rating last season, ahead of players like Luka Garza, like Vernon Carey, like Cassius Winston, like Marcus Howard. He can score at all three levels. He's pretty comfortable shooting off the dribble. He has some. I think it's a bit deceptive, but he's a pretty strong guy, and coming out of college, at least immediately, his greatest asset will be his three-point jump shot. 41.5% from beyond the arc, taking nearly 7 threes per game. His explosiveness, a little bit of a concern, but certainly he can run an offense. He steps up in big moments. His skills are very established, and he's pretty old at this point, relatively speaking. So that's unfortunately some things that can turn people off in the draft. But he's in at number 13. Number 12, Cassius Winston, very similar in that respect. I'm going to roll through these a little bit quicker here. A gifted player with the ball in his hands, a great three-point shooter, good in the pick and roll, and just a good in the half court in general. He's going to struggle with explosiveness, athleticism. He's only 6'1". He needs to get stronger and be a better defender. But even if he becomes a better defender, he's going to be not all that versatile. But I think there's a place for him in the NBA. Devon Dotson, the Kansas guard, coming in at number 11. He's certainly a little undersized, but he's a really solid defender. 2.1 steals per game at Kansas last season. He competes on the defensive end, which is a good thing, and he's another guy on the long list of guards that has been an All-American at Kansas for Bill Self. The only thing I'll say here is, listen, Devontae Graham is 6'1", 195, and Dotson is 6'2", 185. The point is that Graham had a breakout year in the NBA this year for the Hornets. Dotson needs to become a better three-point shooter, especially off the dribble and off the catch. But because if you can't sag off of him, then his speed, he's going to be able to get around a lot of guys. He's going to be able to turn the corner nicely. But I think his success in the NBA it leans on him being able to get a really consistent and be somewhere 37% and above three-point shooter. Number 10, Trey Jones. He's the best on-ball defender in this draft, in my opinion. His brother Tyus Jones has turned into a very good backup point guard in the NBA. Jones is elite. He doesn't have great length or incredible size, but I find it hard to believe he's going to be a bad defender in the NBA because of that. He's going to be really, really good on the defensive end. He can run an offense really nicely, and I think this is where, similar to his brother, where he's going to end up in the NBA as an elite defensive guard that can run an offense, specifically a second unit, and make the guys that are also part of that second unit better. And Trey Jones plays really good defense, doesn't make a lot of mistakes, makes his teammates better, and that's what you need from a backup point guard. That's a really good backup point guard in the NBA. He showed signs in his three-point percentage went up 10 percentage points from his freshman to sophomore year. That's really good. Went to 36% from 26%, so he certainly has the ability to make it happen. He's number 10 on my list. Number 9, Theo Maledon, the French guard. Theo is one of those young guys who has the physical attributes to be a really nice on-ball defender in the NBA. He's 6'5" with a 6'9" wingspan. He's a little eager, struggles with fouls at times, and certainly needs help just sort of understanding defense a little bit more and not getting caught off guard without, being on his heels, whatever it might be. On the offensive end, he's in control, shows a lot of patience, is pretty good in the pick and roll. He's not a flashy isolation scorer, which can be a little bit of a concern, but he's long, good in the pick and roll, and a good playmaker for his teammates. He's got some room to improve, but he's got the physical attributes on the defensive end. He's got some of those foundational pieces on offense. I think he'll be pretty good in the NBA. He's 9th on my list. 8th, Grant Ryler. Grant Ryler is a Charleston College of Charleston guard who is the number 2 all-time scorer in the Colonial Athletic Association. He's one of the best all-around scoring guards in this draft. 21.9 points per game in each of his last 2 seasons at Charleston. He's 6'3", really creative around the rim, has a beautiful step-back jumper, can shoot the 3 as well. He's going to need to get better on the defensive end, and it starts with just applying himself more. But he should be a really great backup spark bench scorer in the NBA. He's 8th on my list. Nico Mannion, 7th, one of the best IQs in this draft, basketball IQs. He's got underrated athleticism in my opinion, but that's certainly somewhere where he's a little bit weaker. He's great in the pick and roll. He can knock down shots as a spot-up shooter. He needs to get a little bit more consistent from deep, but he has a nice shot and can score at all 3 levels. But his passing ability, court vision, basketball IQ is why he's where he is. He's at number 7. Number 6, my boy Tyrell Terry. It is not ridiculous it's ridiculous to suggest he could be Steph Curry, but it's not ridiculous to look at the connections between him and Steph. He's a dynamite shooter that shoots with the utmost confidence. He's undersized, but there's very little reason, and his range is limitless. Sound familiar? Steph Curry was undersized, confident, and a limitless shooter. He gets his shot off quick from pretty much anywhere. He's great at stopping on a dime, moving without the basketball. And he'll pull up in transition like Curry will as well. 5, Cole Anthony. He's a good-sized guard, can score it really well, really exciting. He should be a pretty solid defender in the NBA as well. Where he needs to work on is making teammates better and not being so isolation heavy, and really forming into a true point guard in the NBA. 4th on my list, the reincarnation of Colin Sexton. That's Kira Lewis Jr. He's like Colin Sexton, the fastest guard in this draft, in my opinion. Is really fun to watch with the ball in his hands. He needs to get a little bit better on defense. His lack of size makes him less versatile, but adds some muscle, applies himself a little more. He's Colin Sexton with a better jump shot, and that's not a bad thing. He's 4th on my list. 3rd, Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese could end up being the best guard in this draft. I don't think that's a ridiculous thing to say at all. Long arms, lanky, really nice point guard. Great at making his teammates better. Doesn't make a lot of mistakes. Very Monte Morris-like in that sense. 15 points, 6.5 assists, 5.9 rebounds along with 2.5 steals. He'll need to get a little bit more. His length at the point guard position is rare. Hopefully he gets a little bit more explosive. And he's a really good rebounding guard as well. He's a great three-point shooter. He's got a weird-ish release, but it goes in, and he's 6'5", so the fact that it's a little bit of a lower release isn't necessarily a bad thing. And when you're 6'5", you have a little room to maneuver there. Number 2, Killian Hayes. Killian Hayes, in my opinion, is the best pick-and-roll point guard in this draft. He has a polished offensive skill set. He doesn't have crazy explosives, but he's a quick-thinking guard with nice handles. He can create for himself and his teammates off the dribble. He needs to work on it being a little bit more ambidextrous, but that's something that all 19-year-olds can work on, is being better with both hands. He's a left-handed guard naturally. He's not a stellar three-point shooter yet. He shot 39% from deep in the Euro Cup in 2019-20, so he's capable. The larger sample size suggests, however, that he's still very much a work in process. He's got a really nice step back jumper, both out of the pick and roll and in isolation. But he's got great game sense. He's a really nice passer, especially out of the pick and roll. He needs to get better creating in isolation, and because his explosiveness might hinder his ability to get around NBA caliber defenders. But here's the thing, the NBA is such a pick and roll dominated game. Pick and roll, pace and space, shooters around him, athletic big man rolling to the rim. Or athletic big man pick and popping. He's capable of all of those things, running the show in all of those situations. And then first on my list is LaMelo Ball. There are some things that LaMelo does with the ball in his hands that are they just kind of blow you away. 17.6.8 assists, 7.6 rebounds over 12 games most recently for the Illawarra Hawks in Australia and then NBL. There's a lot of things to love about Ball's game. He's huge, 6'6". We'll be able to see over a lot of backcourt opponents. He's got a special passing ability and really nice court vision. He needs to get better just making the right play instead of the highlight play. He can finish at the rim really nicely. The thing about LaMelo, I think that in terms of these guards, the guy with the highest ceiling is LaMelo, and it's not really all that close. But his decision-making needs to get better. His shot selection, his three-point shooting needs to get better. I think that if you put those two things together, that you'll see an improvement in the three-point shooting, if you see an improvement in shot selection and just decision-making, and then just applying himself on the defensive end. He's 6'6", for crying out loud. He should be able to guard anybody in the backcourt in the NBA. He just needs to apply himself a little bit. Great passer, good in the pick and roll, really good in the pick and roll. I think decision-making will shore up some of those weak spots, three-point shooting, defense, just be a better decision-maker on the court, and he can be really good because the raw talent is really, really, really fun to watch. But that's my list of guards. I'm doing it every week. We'll do shooting guards next week. I've really enjoyed doing this piece over at 110sportsmedia.com. And if you'd like to go check it out, it's over there on the site right now. Coming up next, we'll do some FYI. Get out of here on a Wednesday. Twitch.tv/110sports. Thank you so much for watching. You're watching the Jmull Show, 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the Jmull Show on a Wednesday, wrapping up here with some FYI for your information. I got some coaching things I want to talk about real quick. First of all, the Clippers are still messing around interviewing other people instead of just hiring Tyronn Lue. Just hire Tyronn Lue. I'm not sure why they're making this harder than it needs to be. Tyronn Lue stepped into a situation very similar to this one in Cleveland and went and won a championship. He's been on that bench as an assistant coach because the Clippers need to win right now. You don't have a year to get familiar with a new coach. They need to hire somebody from within, and Tyronn Lue, been there, done that with the Cavs, with LeBron. He's a good manager of personalities, and clearly that needs to be worked on, because clearly there was some clear differences in the way that Doc Rivers treated his superstars and the rest of his team. Now, everyone knows that Doc Rivers takes care of his superstars, but clearly it was an issue, and Tyronn Lue found a way to coach a team that had a lot of superstars and coach them well enough to get a title. Stan Van Gundy, who I've really enjoyed having him on TV. Having him on TV during the playoffs was a lot of fun. I think he's good on TV, but he's emerged as a finalist and formidable candidate in the New Orleans Pelicans search for a head coach. That would be an interesting one as well. The Jets continue to just dig themselves a hole. Everything good about the Jets in the last several years has just been destroyed, whether it be Sam Darnold or anything else. The most recent one is the fact that Le'Veon Bell, they waived Le'Veon Bell, who it hasn't been all that long since Le'Veon Bell was the elitist of the elite in terms of running backs in the NFL. He'll find a place where he's useful pretty quickly, I would assume. But the Jets, that's just an absolute train wreck of an organization. And then finally, touch on Talk with Josh Doring tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern. And then at 1 p.m. Eastern, Around the Bases with Chris Brown. Maybe we're talking about the end of the ALCS. After tonight, maybe he's talking about how both teams, both the Dodgers and the Astros, were able to get convincing wins on this particular Wednesday evening to make these series a little more interesting. But whatever it is, he'll break it down tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern on Around the Bases. I'll be back on Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern as well. We'll talk about whatever there is to talk about at that point on Friday. We'll preview what's happening over the weekend in the sports world as well. We'll do all of that on Friday. Until then, please take care of yourselves, stay safe, and I will see you back here 11 a.m. Eastern on Friday.